before we started this weekend's homework would be helpful. We discussed in most of the class the position versus time graph for our most recent Blinky car lab would look like this. The starting position was 0. The object, the Blinky car, moved in a positive direction at a constant velocity. We know the starting position was 0 because the y-intercept was 0. We know it was moving in a positive direction because it's a positive slope. And we know that it was moving at a constant speed because the slope represents the speed and the slope is constant, therefore constant speed. Well, what if the Blinky car was started at 0 but was moving at a constant speed but slower than our original Blinky car? Like maybe if there was one battery instead of 2 batteries. And let's see, is this going to let me write? Let's give it a shot. So starting position would be 0, same y-intercept, positive slope, positive direction, but slower because the slope is not as steep. Likewise, what if the object started in a position of 0, was moving in a positive direction, just way faster? What would that look like? Same starting position, same direction, but a faster constant velocity, assuming that all 3 of those lines are constants. So let's consider that first line. The original lab that we had, starting position 0, moved in a positive direction at a constant speed. Well, could it be going the same speed but not have the same velocity? And the answer is yes. What if we started at the same position and moved in the opposite direction at the same speed? Notice that the angle of these 2 lines is actually the same, even though the angles are positive, have a positive slope and a negative slope. So it would travel the same distance in the same amount of time, so the same speed, but the direction would be different. What if the object was traveling the same speed? We'll mark this one. Object, let's see, ABC. Let's make this object D. What if we had an object D that didn't start at a position of 0? What would that graph look like? Well, if it wasn't starting at a position of 0, where was it started? Why don't we have it start at some positive position? Notice, I'll go ahead and mark this one E. And so for object E, the object started at some positive position, right? It's moving in a negative direction at the same constant speed as object D. Notice that the lines are parallel. Could an object start at a negative position? If so, what would that look like? Well, keep in mind, right on the time axis, that is a position of 0. Anything that is above the time axis would be positive positions. Anything below that time axis would be negative positions. So if an object started at a positive position and moved in a negative direction towards a position of 0 and then continued to move in a negative direction, the graph would look like this. Could an object start in a negative position? You bet. And if it moved in a negative direction, it might look like this. Or how about an object starts in a negative position and moves in a positive direction at a constant speed? So those are all variants. Again, the y-intercept represents the starting position. The slope being a negative slope means it's in a negative direction. A positive slope tilted upward means it's moving in a positive direction. And the relative steepness of the lines shares relative speed. The steeper the line, the faster it's going. Well, let's take a look at one of the problems from the homework. Let's take a look at video 3. We'll go ahead and play that. And the car, where did it start? Well, if this is 0 and these are positive positions and these are negative positions, this starts at a negative position. And is moving towards the positive position. At one point it crosses point 0 and now it's in a positive position and moving in a positive direction. So let's go ahead and pause that and get back to our Google Doc. There we go. So how would we go about doing this? Well, the starting position, it was not in a positive position or at 0. It started at some negative position. It moved in a positive direction at a constant constant speed, passing position 0. That's when the position would have been 0, right? And it continued to move at the same constant speed. And it wasn't very fast, so we probably don't want this to be super steep, but that's all relative. What about the written description? What belongs in the written description? We have to talk about the starting position. The car started at some negative position. At a negative position. Which direction did it move? That's right. It moved in a positive direction. We know that because the slope is positive. Moved in a positive direction. And what kind of speed did we have? Was it speeding up, slowing down? Was it stopped? It was moving at a constant speed. How do we know that? Because the speed didn't change. It was having equal, it moved at the same distance per unit time, right? And so it moved in a positive direction at a constant speed. Another way you could have phrased this is the car started at a negative position. It moved at a positive constant velocity. And a detail here, we might want to add and ended at a positive position. And that's the idea that it started at a negative position, went through position 0, position, and ended at some positive position. I hope that helps.